Hello, my name is Michael Cotton, and I want to walk you through some of the editing techniques that I'm using for the Arkansas Tech Conan opener. And first off, right here, I want to show you the two programs I'm in. I'm going to be in Adobe Audition and Ableton Live. Adobe Audition, I'm using purely to edit the sound itself, whereas Ableton Live, I'm using to actually change the timing, change notes, do a lot of different things, and actually putting the arrangement together. So up first, I have the saxophone recording. And what you'll notice right off the bat is it's not super loud. It's only maxing out at about negative 23 decibels, which we want it to be much bigger and much more present in the recording when we mix it together. However, the issue we're running into is if we amplify the audio, we're going to get a lot of hissing and feedback from the recording. I don't know how well you can hear that sound. So if we were to do this for every single track and put them together, that hissing is going to become deafening and extremely distracting. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to highlight some of the recording that has no actual saxophone in it, just this background sound. And I'm going to come up to my effects and I am going to capture the noise print. And what this does is it captures a copy of the spectrograph of the audio where it is on the frequency spectrum. And whenever I go to noise reduction, it's going to take those sounds and it's going to do its best to filter them out while simultaneously retaining audio quality. And the higher I put up the percentage in the decibels, the more it's going to distort the audio, but the more it's going to filter out that sound. So it's all about kind of finding that sweet spot of where you're going to get rid of the hiss, but you're not going to lose audio quality. So I'm going to go ahead and apply this noise reduction to the entire track. And now I'm going to amplify it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come to Filter EQ. I'm going to get my parametric equalizer, and this is just a copy of the sound spectrum. So if I play a little bit, you'll see there's the other different frequencies. And what I'm doing is I'm boosting the fundamental pitch. I'm getting rid of a little bit of the thuddy center, and then I'm sweetening up the overtones, really bringing them out. And that's going to help make the saxophone sound really clear and present. And then I'm going to come do another process called normalize, which is just going to really beef up the sound waves. You'll see this when I apply it. So boom, it's much bigger. But now if I play the beginning, you're not going to hear that hissing like we did before, but we're still going to have a nice, clear, present saxophone. So that's what I'm using Adobe Audition for, is to do that effect. So now we're going to pop over here to Ableton Live. I have the edited saxophone, the edited clarinet, and then I have an unedited saxophone and an unedited clarinet. So let's just listen to what the unedited saxophone and clarinet sound like together. And you're going to notice that because these were all recorded separately, it's going to be really out of time with each other. So notice that the longer it goes, the more and more that it's getting out of time. So the way that we're able to fix that, and I'm going to pop up here to my edited one, which has been edited both in Adobe Audition and Ableton. And you're going to notice I have all these yellow marks down here. What you're looking at is a grid of the actual music itself. So 65 is measure 65, 66 is measure 66, and you're seeing it broken up into 4 beats with each little tile being the and. And each of these markers, you see the gray ones and the yellow ones are called warp markers, and they are on transients. So transients are the beginning of a sound. So think of it as the beginning of articulation. Ta, that t is the transient. And what it does is whenever I highlight one in yellow, it lets me move it around. But the other yellow ones act as anchors. And so if I move this yellow one, you'll notice that the gray ones to its left will move, but nothing outside of those yellow anchors will move. So I can actually take this music and move it around. So I'm going to turn on my metronome and isolate the saxophone and just listen to the beginning. I'm going to turn that metronome up a little bit. So notice it's very perfectly on the grid. However, I could easily take these warp markers and throw it off, and it's going to sound pretty convincing and really out of time. Now, the more you stretch a warp marker, the more it's going to distort the audio, but small changes are pretty much unperceivable. So notice there how I had those changes. Yeah, you could hear a little bit of crackling and distortion in it, but if I move it just a little tiny bit, it's just going to sound slightly out of time. Maybe I'll do a little bit more to make it a bit more obvious. What I've done is I've gone through all these different sections and I've essentially locked everybody into the grid. So if I come up here to the battery in purple, for example, you're going to see that there's been a lot of locking into the grid. And this is to ensure that every other instrument that's been recorded is also going to be able to be locked in. So you'll see there's been quite a bit for each instrument. So that's how I've handled the rhythm. Now, in terms of the actual notes, there's actually a lot I can do as well. So I'm at letter E to F right now in your music. That's because this is easily the most difficult spot in terms of lining up the individual articulation and the style. And I'm going to notice right here in the clarinet part, for example, we have a squeak right here in this measure. So listen to that again. Here on that second note, we have that squeak right there. So what I've actually done is I've cut out the audio of this third note right here. And I've duplicated it to right here. And I've actually pitch shifted it down. So if you look here, sorry, I've pitch shifted up. I've transposed it up 2 semitones. That's what 2ST stands for. And so now it just sounds like they just played it correctly with no squeaks. Another example of where something like this happened is I believe this is in measure 75. The second clarinet has an F natural and an F sharp. I think someone accidentally threw down an F natural. And so you'll hear a bit of a minor second rub. So right there. What I've done is I've actually taken the note from before, duplicated it over, and again I've pitched it up 2 semitones, so that way it just sounds like it's part of the natural thing. Now you might notice that it sounds really, really choppy. That's actually done intentionally because individually, while it sounds like this style is overdone, if I put it in the context of the entire piece, it's actually matching everybody else's articulation. So notice the brass are very D, 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 and the clarinets played very long da, da, da. So I had to really shorten it and able to match style. And again, this is just one of those things that's very inherent with recording people separately. Now, a place that I did something kind of cool was right here at the end. And again, clarinets, sorry, I'm dogging on you all a little bit. You really did a fantastic job. And just to prove I'm not lying, here's the whole ending. Notice I only had to put warp markers at the very end. Everything else was unedited in your whole last statement in the piece. And so what happened is there was the clarinets are jumping up really high here, getting into letter F, and someone accidentally going from the high F sharp to the high E squeaked that note, and then someone also popped down the octave, so they lost that altissimo note. So sorry, so it sounds like this normally. So we hear that there's a squeak, and then on the end, someone falls off the note. Again, it's a really difficult passage. So what I've done is I've taken that first note, which is that high F sharp, and then I've duplicated that high F sharp here. And so what I've done is I've taken the entrance, and you'll see this sort of X pattern. What that's doing is it's taking the first audio clip and the second audio clip, and it's blending them in together. And if you don't do this blending, you're going to get a sharp when it switches from one audio clip to the other. So it'll sound like dee, da, and we want to remove that by blending the two together to create this seamless transition. So that transition sounds like this. So notice it's really, really smooth. Then what I've done is I've actually copied, I've separated the end of it. And if I just move the bar, it just moves the clip. But if I hold down Shift, it'll actually stretch it out over time. And again, same idea, the more you stretch it, the more it's going to degrade the audio. And I've done the same technique where I have crossed these two. I've used elision to put them over top of each other. So it's a really smooth thing. And then I've stretched out the end of the note to mimic the endings of everyone else's. If you look at their waveforms, you see that they gradually taper down. And I wanted that to be mimicked. So I actually have this where I can drag the release down into silence, and I was able to match the length of everybody else's note. So when you hear it, it just sounds very natural. And when we put it in the context of everybody, There we go. Sounds great and natural. Now, two other techniques, and then I'll finish up here. One thing that I've done to create more of a stereo sound effect is if you look over here on the right, you'll see it says 41L, 20L, 23R, 40R. What this is it's talking about left and right. If you have 0, that's in the dead center. If you have 50L, that's all the way left. If you have 50R, that's all the way right. So I've actually taken the audio, duplicated it, shift 1 primarily right, shift 1 primarily left, and then you'll see this -9 ms. What I've done is I've actually shifted the right recording back 9 milliseconds. And what this does is it normally, if you do this, it'll create a sound wave where the sound waves are in exact synchronization with each other, and it just sounds really bad. It sounds very artificial. And so by just barely changing those sound waves, you avoid that problem. So interestingly enough, in person, you want your sound waves to be perfectly matched because they amplify each other. In audio like this, you don't want them duplicated because they actually start canceling each other out and having this really mechanical sound. But what this does is this helps me create a stereo sound effect. And I don't know if you can actually hear that in stereo, but you hear it coming from multiple places as opposed to just one central point. And there's other things I can do as well to create that effect, but that one is kind of just the most simple to get the most bang for your buck. The other thing that I'm really having to struggle with is how to make this sound like it's outside. And so one of the most obvious ways that someone would achieve this is by just throwing like reverb on the entire thing. But I have my Valhalla reverb right here. If I turn it on and really turn it up and I solo it out, you're going to notice that it sounds really artificial and like it's indoors. See, you get a lot of echo. It sounds very muffled. It sounds kind of thuddy. And to me, that didn't really imitate sounding outside. And there's probably more I'm going to do to experiment to this. But what I've done is I've actually used my Valhalla Vintage Verb, and I have used it to create a reverb. But if you look over here at this EQ8, what I've done is I've cut out all the low end and I've cut down the high end of it. So it's actually kind of mimicking what it sounds like outdoors. And I've turned the volume, which is right here, down really far. So now it's at -32.3 decibels. Whereas and so what that's done is it's made it very quiet, and I'm trying to create it like this soft tail end. So I'll just solo that out and let you hear what that sounds like by itself. So I don't know how well you can hear that, but it's just this very soft echo. Well, not echo is not the right term, but it's this very soft reverb tail that when you add it to the rest of the arrangement, gives you a little bit of like you're hearing it off in the distance a bit to sort of mimic that effect you'd have in a stereo. It's not a stereo, in a stadium where you'd hear them play and then the sound bounces off somewhere in the distance. So that is a few of the audio techniques that I'm using on the recording, and I'll have it finished later today because the only section I have left are the piccolos.